Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Kerr. I'm here today with an award-winning critic and historian. She was the film critic at the Philadelphia Inquirer for 25 years and has also written for Artforum, Art in America, Film Comment, The New York Times, The Village Voice, and Politico. She has taught at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the University of Pennsylvania. She has a new biography out titled A Complicated Passion, The Life and Work of AGNÈS VARDA, which explores the complicated passions that informed the long career of the legendary filmmaker-photographer. Please welcome Carrie Rickey.
Good morning, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, and I hope you're having a good morning too.
A little bit of stage fright, but okay.
To start things off, would you mind telling us about this book?
AGNÈS VARDA, I'll pronounce her name in the American way, is not a household name in the United States, despite her Oscar and many other awards. She is a beloved filmmaker who actually changed or had a lot to do with changing what films and documentaries are in the world, because she decided to blur the boundaries between a feature film, or, a fiction film and a documentary. She was very influential. I think during her lifetime, she was, a pioneer filmmaker. She was a disruptor in the world of cinema by saying, oh, films don't have to be 90 minutes long. They can be 5 minutes long. They don't have to, show in theaters. They can show on TV. So she was a pioneer, disruptor, and an influencer for many generations of filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese and many younger filmmakers. And you should know her name, even though she is a filmmaker's filmmaker.
And how did the opportunity for you to write the biography come about?
I was trying to get another book off the ground. It was at the beginning of COVID. I wanted to do a history of female filmmakers and how hard it was to get hired or get financed as a female director. Even though, once upon a time when movies were first invented, there were more female filmmakers than there are now, amazingly. When the film industry in Hollywood and other places in the world kind of thought there's money to be made here, studios took over in America and a different form took over in other parts of the world. It became harder and harder for women who had been hugely successful in the silent era to get hired. And so I was looking to do that. An agent called me up and said, would you be interested in writing a biography of AGNÈS VARDA? And it occurred to me I could tell the story of female filmmakers through her life, because she was a director for 65 years, which is the longest career of any female filmmaker. So that's how it came about.
How familiar were you with the work of AGNÈS VARDA prior to this?
I had taught her movies at the universities and colleges I taught at. I had reviewed most of her movies from 1976 forward. That is to say, pretty familiar.
And what was it like for you getting to write the book?
Well, it was COVID, so it was hard to travel to France, and I had to hire a researcher in France because I couldn't get there. It was a 3.5-year process. It was long. I had never written anything that long.
And what do you hope readers end up taking away from the book?
Well, she had a really fascinating creative life in 3 different media. She started out as a photographer, and then the husband of one of her friends got very ill. And in order to distract him, she kind of invented projects for them to do. So she decided, let's go to the set, this place in France where they grew up, and let's take pictures. Let's take moving pictures. She did that, and she structured it as a very complicated story. And she enjoyed the filmmaking process so much that without ever having made a film before, she made the film that inspired the French New Wave, which was a huge movement in the late 1950s and early 1960s. You may have heard the names of the directors like François Truffaut, Jean-Luc Godard, Alain Resnais. She got there first, and she was called the godmother of the new wave. And some of those men were a little jealous of her that, she made a movie before they did. But in fact, that Resnais was very supportive of her, and he was her film editor. And he basically taught her how to edit a movie, which became her favorite part of making a movie.
For those unfamiliar with Varda's filmography, which of her movies would you most recommend people to seek out?
I would start with Cleo from 5 to 7. It has the soul of the New Wave movie. The New Wave filmmakers were a little bit like the Impressionist painters. They wanted to make art outside in the sun, reflecting real lives, real places, not on studio sets, live sound, and they kind of, opened the window and brought like, new oxygen and color and real places on screen. And Cleo was made in 1962, kind of at the high tide of the new wave, so to speak. It's set in real time, and it's about a woman waiting for her cancer. She's a singer. She's very, very nervous, and she's very, very pretty, and she's accustomed to being looking at. But on this day, during this 90-minute to 2-hour time period, she's really nervous about being looked at. She doesn't want people to know that she might be sick. She's scared. Something in her snaps, and she decided, she doesn't want to be the one to be looked at. She wants to be the one to do the looking. So this is a movie that really resonates for a lot of my students. And when I was 19 and I saw it in a film class, it really resonated for me because it was the first movie that I ever saw that I was conscious of being directed by a woman. And it kind of connected with kind of certain female anxieties and perhaps male anxieties as well about being the center of attention when you're not sure you want to be. And of course, it's Paris in the 1960s, so it's beautiful and there's a lot of local color, even though it's a black and white movie. I would definitely start there. The thing about Agnes is that she was both of her own time and ahead of her time, something you can't say about a lot of artists. And she would go on to make various documentaries such as The Gleaners and I, which might be her most important movie and one of her most seen. In France, you might remember a famous painting by Millet about harvesters going in after the harvest and kind of picking up what was left by the harvesters. And she made this movie at a moment of when agricultural waste and our ecosystem were being spoken of. And she was interested in how do we distribute food more equitably. By the same token, how we don't amass stuff and how we should recycle food, collections, furniture, how that works in the world and how that might lead to a better world. So that's another movie that really resonated with young students and was a real, I guess, boost for the green movement. And taught people that they didn't have to buy new. They could honor leftovers, survive on leftovers, and not waste resources. It was a very inspiring movie for, I guess I would say, my daughter's generations. Those are, I think, two movies that people might want to start with.
In 2017, Varda received an honorary Oscar for how her compassion and curiosity informed a uniquely personal cinema. 2 months later, she became the oldest competitive Oscar nominee, at least at that point, for her documentary Faces Places. What did that mean to you to see her get such major recognition like that near the end of her life?
Well, I think what's more important is what it meant to her. I think all of her life, she struggled a little harder than her male counterparts to get funded, to get distribution. And she'd always kind of been the one on the outside. It both surprised and amused her to be in the middle of the mainstream because she had never really been totally mainstream. She'd been a little bit her own artist. She didn't make movies to please producers. She made movies to connect with audiences. I think it made her very happy. She did something very important that a lot of female artists in America do as well. She hired a lot of women to be her cinematographers, her composers, her set decorators when she needed one. And those women got into the business, and many of them are making movies as well right now. That's what female directors in America have been doing. Like Ava DuVernay made a TV series called Queen Sugar, and she always hired females to direct it because she wanted to get more women into unions and more women working. And the thing is, around the world, since the silent era, women have been the minority by far of movie directors. And I always think that movie directors show us how the world works. In 1991, when my stepdaughter was 5 years old, the percentage of female directors in America was 5%. That's very low. And I remember calling the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the woman there told me the lowest percentages of women are in two professions, coal mining and film directing. And she said, I can't tell you why. And I said, well, it's habit. Men trust men more than they trust women. They're making the decisions on what kind of movies to make. In France, it's a little different. Like every movie starts as an independent movie. France actually, gives grants to filmmakers. France wanted to even the playing field And so they give tax and financial credits to movies directed by women. And in France now, number of women directing films is like 27%, while in the United States, it's not quite 19% now. From 1991 to 2024, let's say, in 33 years, the needle only moved from 5% to 19% in the United States. I would like to see more women in the business because movies written and directed by women have more women in them and have equal numbers of male and female, which is where I would like the culture to be.
And I guess while we're on the subject about, the state of female filmmakers, as of now, we've had 3 women win the Oscar for Best Director. And last year, Greta Gerwig became the first woman to helm a billion-dollar hit on her own with Barbie.
Absolutely.
And what are your thoughts on the current state of female directors?
Well, the movie industry is in free fall right now for a variety of reasons. Because of streaming, there's major writer strikes and actor strikes in the last few years. It seems like every time it looks good for women in Hollywood, the momentum isn't there. It's troubling. But in France, there's momentum. In other parts of the world, there is.
I guess now touching a little more on you, now going back to the beginning, how did you first get started as a journalist?
My parents were essentially immigrants to the United States. Although my father was born here, his parents were from Lithuania. And my mom was born in Mexico, and she came to the United States when she was 13, I think. And so movies were very important both to my father growing up and my mother growing up, because at the movies you learned how to be American. We went to a lot of movies as a family and we talked about them. I like those conversations. I really like talking about movies, and I realized with movies, everyone saw something slightly different because they were seeing themselves up there or not seeing themselves up there. They were very interesting. And I came to college kind of wanting to write about movies and what they meant. And I had this very idiosyncratic and influential film professor named Manny Farber. I went to the University of California at San Diego, and thinking and writing and talking about movies kind of slowly became my life. I was, a lit major, but that's where a lot of credits began.
And for those who'd like to pursue a career in film criticism, where do you think would be a good place to start?
Well, I wish I could collect all my work in one place, but unfortunately, the Village Voice and the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Boston Herald own me, and their sites aren't not easy to navigate. You need to subscribe. So unlike Roger Ebert, who was a friend of mine and told me I should own my own work, he has this great website with all of his work in one place. And I didn't organize that as well as Roger did, to my eternal shame.
Yeah, although my question was, where do you think would be a good place to start for those who'd like to pursue a career in film criticism?
Oh, I thought you meant my career. Forgive me.
No worries, but that was still a good answer.
I think TikTok. I think that the younger generation, I'm assuming you're in your 20s. Am I right?
Well, I just turned 30 this past March.
Well, congratulations. I think the social network world, or the world of social networks, is largely what a lot of people are looking at and where one could make a splash. That's probably where I would start. I would start doing things that I never learned how to do, which is to be fluent on video, to be able to write, to be able to do radio. I actually taught a class in the different way to communicate in different media forms. From that class, I think 3 have found some work in film criticism or literary criticism. I was very happy. 3 out of 12. So that's pretty good. It was a seminar. Because on radio, you edit out all the words that you use all the words that you edit out in a written review, because people want to hear the more familiar expressions. I'm not quite sure about TikTok. TikTok is very hard for me to communicate with or on. When I came up, written reviews where it was. And I think now that TikTok and YouTube is where it's at.
Well, yeah, and I myself do follow a number of critics, reviewers through, different websites, podcasts, and YouTube channels. So yeah, I guess you can say my generation has certainly gotten into a good habit of that.
I would start there.
Now, before we go, do you have any other upcoming projects that you'd like to share with us?
Selling the book. That's my project for the next 3 months.
Carrie, I thank you very much for devoting your time to this interview. It was great getting to talk to you.
Thank you.
And for those who'd like to keep up with your career, where can people find you on the internet?
CarrieRickey.com.
And A Complicated Passion, the life and work of AGNÈS VARDA should be in stores now, and so be sure to pick up a copy. And thanks again for joining me today, Carrie. This was great.
Thank you very much. Good luck to you, Jeffrey.